Hello, dreamers, and welcome to Dreaming Isle. I'm here to guide you into a calm and magical place tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps bring more dreamers to our little corner of the stars. And if you'd like, share in the comments, what's the world outside your window like right now? Now, find your cozy spot. Let go of the day, and let the story begin. The wind curled around the broken towers like a ghost unsure of where it died. Kalen sat beneath a leaning archway, the stone beneath him slick with moss, his sword resting in its rotted scabbard. He hadn't drawn it in years. Not since the last bell tolled from the great keep's tower, a sound swallowed by ivy and time. This place had once been a city of silver banners and singing glass. Now, it was home to no one but him, and the crows. He did not mind the crows. They came and went, left feathers near his fire, watched him with curious eyes. At dusk, Kalen climbed the western wall, as he did each evening, to watch the sun die. The world always seemed to hold its breath in those last few moments, when the sky turned red gold and the forest below shimmered like embers. He liked that, how the end of the day could still burn so brightly. Then, one evening, something strange happened. The sky cracked. Not thunder. Not storm. A crack, as if a pane of glass had shattered above the clouds. Kalen stood, heart thudding, eyes narrowed. A streak of light tore across the heavens, burning white and blue, trailing sparks like falling petals. It vanished behind the eastern ridge. And then, silence. No birds. No wind. Not even his breath dared move. He stared for a long time before finally descending the wall. Tomorrow, he would go east. For the first time in years, his sword would leave its sheath. The morning came slow and colorless. Mist clung to the treetops like old lace, and the stone walls of the keep sweated with cold. Kalen moved like a man half remembering how to live. His armor groaned as he strapped it on, stiff from disuse. The sword, once ceremonial and shining, now bore the rust of countless seasons. Still, it fit his hand. That was enough. He took the forest road east. No path truly remained, just the suggestion of one. A dip in the earth where once pilgrims had walked and caravans passed. Now it was overgrown with thorn vine and black ferns, the kind that whispered against your boots and left silver stains on your cloak. Hours passed, perhaps more. Time became a thing of birdsong and breath. But then he smelled it, smoke, sharp and strange. Not wood smoke, something older. Like incense burned too long. He slowed. The trees parted in a natural clearing, a circle of pines so tall they scraped the clouded sky. In the center, a crater, still steaming. Blackened earth spread like a wound. At its heart lay a shape, curled tight, gleaming faintly. A creature. It was no larger than a hound, its scales the color of dying embers, deep crimson veined with gold. Wings tucked in, tail coiled. A horned head lay resting on folded claws. Sleeping, or unconscious. Kalen approached slowly, armor creaking. He did not know why he came closer, only that he could not leave it. Then the creature stirred. A golden eye opened. It looked at him, not with fear or fury, but calm understanding. The dragon blinked once, and whispered, "You heard the sky break too." Kalen stood still, every part of him alert. The dragon, if it truly was one, watched him from the center of the crater, smoke curling softly from its nostrils. Its golden eye shimmered with intelligence far too old for something so small. He had heard stories of beasts like this, but none told of one so quiet or so calm. The wind stirred. Ash rose and fell like snow. "You speak," Kalen said, his voice rough from disuse. "How?" The creature stretched, wings unfurling just slightly, then folded them back in with a gentle rustle. "Words are just magic in softer clothes," it replied, its voice thin and melodic, like bells in a dream. I learned long before the world forgot. Kalen crouched near the crater's edge. He did not approach further. Something deep within him warned that to touch a being fallen from the sky was to tempt the threads of fate. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "I am emptied," said the dragon. "Magic burns like breath. I fell too far, too fast." Its gaze moved to him again. "You are hollow too." He didn't answer. Instead, he looked around the clearing. No footprints, no signs of beasts. Just him and the creature in the scarred earth. The pine trees leaned inward as though listening. "I am called Kalen," he said. The dragon's head tilted. "Kalen," it repeated, savoring the sound. "You carry sorrow like armor, but it does not fit you well." He narrowed his eyes. "And what's your name, star creature?" The dragon blinked. A faint light pulsed in its chest. "Ember, a child's name. It is enough." A silence settled between them. The forest changed as the sun bled from the sky. What was once silent became alert, branches shifting with no breeze, shadows stretching longer than they should. Kalen felt it in his bones. Something was watching. The kind of feeling he used to have before a sword was drawn. Not fear, exactly, something colder. Attention, a truth. Ember stirred beside him, breath slow but eyes open. The little dragon's wings twitched. "It's near," it whispered. Kalen rose and stepped to the edge of the crater, hand on the hilt of his sword. "What is it?" he asked. "A hunter," Ember said. "Not of beasts, but of magic. My fall lit the dark. It smelled me." The first sound came like a breath over gravel. Then a low click, wooden, wrong. From the trees stepped a figure. It was tall, draped in robes that looked like they had once been human garments, now stiffened with moss and dirt. Its face was no face, just bark and bone. Hollow eye sockets filled with faint green flame. Fingers too long, hands crooked like roots torn from earth. It moved without walking, gliding over the forest floor. "Knight of Dust," it rasped, "lead the flame. It is not yours to hold." Kalen did not speak. He drew his sword, slow and smooth. The blade groaned with age, as if even it remembered war. The creature laughed, a sound like dead leaves crackling. "I guard what I choose," Kalen said. Ember rose, trembling slightly. "Be careful," it whispered. "It is called the Hollerite, born of the withering. It feeds on magic and forgets its name." The Hollerite tilted its head. "You will be buried here, night. Your bones will feed the forest." Kalen shifted his stance. "If so," he said, "I will leave scars in the soil." The air crackled. The Hollerite came forward, and Kalen charged. Steel met rot. Kalen's blade struck the Hollerite's outstretched arm, carving through bark and sinew, but not cleanly. The creature hissed, a green mist spilling from the wound, sizzling as it touched the earth. It struck back with a twist of its clawed hand, and Kalen barely ducked in time. A jagged slash tore across his pauldron, sparks flying. He gritted his teeth. This thing moved like it had once been human, then forgot what it meant. Ember circled above the crater's edge, wings fluttering weakly. The dragon let out a warning cry, its throat glowing faintly. Behind, Kalen turned, lifting his sword just in time to block a second arm, one the creature had hidden beneath its robes, formed from writhing roots. The impact knocked him back. He stumbled, boots sliding in the ash. The Hollerite advanced. "I smell your sorrow," it rasped. "So ripe, so easy." Kalen steadied himself, then choke on it. He drove forward with a sudden thrust, his sword plunging deep into the creature's chest. A flash of green light burst out, and the Hollerite shrieked, flailing. Its robes ignited, not with fire, but with white-blue sparks. Ember dove. With a cry that was part roar, part song, the dragon exhaled a small stream of fire. It wasn't much, but it struck the wound, and the creature screamed again. Its form began to unravel, roots snapping, bones cracking like dry branches. Then, silence. The Hollerite collapsed into a heap of ash and moss, the fire hissing into smoke. Kalen stood breathing hard, sword blackened and arm trembling. Ember landed beside him, wobbling slightly. "You did not run," it said. "No. You fought for me." "I suppose I did." The dragon lowered its head. "Then you are mine now, Kalin of the Hollow Keep." And he, too tired to argue, nodded once. They buried the remains at dawn, not for the Hollowroot's sake, but for the forest's. Ember insisted. "Unburned death seeps," the dragon said, circling the shallow grave with glowing eyes. "The land remembers what we leave behind." Kalin said nothing. He carved a crude sigil into a nearby stone. 2 crossed branches, a circle between them. The mark of warding, a symbol he hadn't drawn in years. The air felt lighter once it was done. He sat back against a tree, breath slow, limbs sore. Ember rested nearby, curled like a cat, tail flicking through the leaves. Their silence was no longer hollow. It was a shared thing now, like a song hummed between verses. "You said you fell," Kalin said at last. "From where?" Ember blinked. "From the Vale, a place between the sky and the deeper dark. Dragons are born from magic that dreams. I was dreaming, and then I wasn't." He frowned. "And now you're real?" "Now I'm awake." Kalin mulled over the words. "And the thing that came for you, was it alone?" "No," Ember whispered. "It was the first to smell me. Others will come. Creatures shaped by famine and forgotten magic. They feed on what was lost. And I am very old magic." Kalin looked toward the east, where the light began to break through the mist. The trees there stood straighter, greener. The land was remembering, too. "I should take you to the keep," he said. "It's falling apart, but it has walls. Fires. Old books." Ember tilted its head. "Books. You'll like them. Words in sleep clothes, remember?" The dragon huffed, pleased. Kalin stood. His armor. The keep looked worse in daylight. Stone walls, once pale and proud, now slumped beneath crawling ivy and black moss. Arch windows had no glass, just gaping mouths that stared out across the overgrown courtyards. A single banner still clung to the southern tower, threadbare and faded, its sigil unrecognizable. Only the bones of memory held the place together. Kalin led Ember through the outer gate, which groaned as it opened. The hinges wept rust, as if crying at being disturbed. "You lived here alone?" Ember asked, voice low. "For many years," Kalin said. "After the others left, or fell." "Why stay?" He paused. "I made a promise. And promises are heavier than steel." They crossed the courtyard. Vines curled through cracked flagstones, and the old fountain in the center had filled with stagnant rainwater. Crows watched them from the gables, silent and still. Ember glanced at the tall tower in the west wing. "What's that?" "The Hall of Ash, where we kept the last books. Warded scrolls. Old oaks." The dragon's eyes gleamed. "Can we go there?" "Soon. First, food." "You're fading." Ember didn't protest. Its wings drooped, and its steps had grown sluggish. Kalin led it down a slanted corridor, where light filtered through holes in the ceiling. They entered a chamber with a collapsed hearth and shelves sagging under old pots and rusted tins. He knelt, rifled through a hidden compartment in the floor, and retrieved a cloth-wrapped bundle. Dried root bread, honey bark, hard cheese, still good. Ember sniffed it all with suspicion, then licked the honey bark. Its eyes widened. "This tastes like sunlight." Kalin chuckled. "Don't get used to it. That was my last piece." They ate in silence. Outside, when the Hall of Ash was quiet as a tomb, Kalin pushed open the heavy doors with effort. Dust billowed in lazy clouds, and the scent of old paper and stone filled the air. Sunlight slanted through the broken windows and golden spears, catching on swirling motes. Shelves lined the chamber, some collapsed, others stubbornly upright. Scrolls lay in bundles, tied in fading ribbon, while books huddled in rows like monks at prayer. Ember stepped in slowly, reverently. "What is this place?" the dragon whispered. "A reliquary of knowledge," Kalin replied. "When the kingdom fell, this hall was sealed. I broke the seal when I returned. I wasn't supposed to." Why not? He gestured to the stone symbols carved into the arch above them, ancient runes, warding signs. Not all knowledge sleeps peacefully. They moved deeper. Kalen stopped before a low table, its surface littered with open tomes and brittle maps. One showed a land that no longer existed. Rivers now dry, cities crumbled to myth. He turned a page of a worn book, notes in the margin, written in his own hand. Long ago, in brighter days. Ember nosed a thick volume with a cracked leather cover. It fell open, revealing a sketch of a dragon much larger than the little one, its wings arched across a sky full of stars. Is that one of yours? Kalen asked. Ember stared at the drawing. Maybe. Or maybe I was meant to become it. We are shaped by the magic we keep, and the company we keep. They wandered in silence. Then Kalen stopped beside a locked cabinet, half buried in rubble. Behind its iron bars sat a book bound in silver chain. Ember tensed. That one burns. I know, Kalen murmured. It's not meant to be read. Then why keep it? He looked at the little dragon. To remember what forgetting costs. Outside, thunder rumbled. The wind had changed. That night, the wind howled without rest. The skies above the keep darkened unnaturally, though no rain fell. Just wind twisting, rising, scraping across stone like claws. Kalen stood atop the watchtower again, cloak snapping behind him, eyes scanning the forest line. Ember perched nearby, wings tucked tight, tail curled around the crumbled battlement. There's something in the wind, Ember said. Not a creature. A calling. Kalen nodded. I feel it too, like a bell ringing deep beneath the earth. The trees below swayed, though the branches never touched. Gaps widened where none had been. The forest was shifting. Magic does not always roar, Ember whispered. Sometimes it breathes. Kalen rested a hand on his sword hilt. He hated the feeling growing in his chest, not fear, not quite. Expectation. A sense that the world was moving towards something, and he was standing still. I've heard this kind of silence before, he said. Before a siege. Ember looked up at him. Then the walls may not be enough. They descended to the keep's heart, what had once been a chapel, now hollowed and cold. Kalen lit the old lanterns, and their flames cast flickering shadows against shattered statues. At the altar, he knew. Not to pray, just to think. Ember rested on the stone beside him. I was not made for war, the dragon said. Kalen raised an eyebrow. You breathed fire into a Hollerud's chest. That was instinct, Ember murmured. Magic reacting to fear. And this time, Ember looked into the dark. There is no fear, only warning. Kalen stood. Then we'll prepare. If it speaks, I'll listen. If it knocks, I'll answer. And if it breaks the door? He touched the pommel of his sword. Then it meets steel. Far above them, thunder cracked again. The crack beneath the altar spread with a dry, splintering sound, not loud, but final. Kalen stumbled back as a single root, blackened and thick with sap, coiled upward from the broken stone. It twitched as though sniffing the air, then turned sharply toward him. He drew his knife without thinking. It was small, old, a gift from his mother before her voice had faded and her memories had slipped like fog from the valley. He'd never used it for more than skinning or carving. It wouldn't stop whatever this was. The root slithered over the altar and curled around the scorched pendant, pausing for a moment as if in recognition. Then, without sound, it dragged the pendant down into the crack and disappeared. Kalen stepped forward too late. The altar pulsed once and collapsed inward, not broken, but devoured. The clearing dimmed. The trees didn't move. The sky hadn't changed, but the light had gone strange. A yellowish hue edged the shadows, like lantern flame held beneath old water. He realized it wasn't just light, it was presence. Velmer had taken root. Not fully, not yet, but it was growing. Through memory, through Saren. Kalen clutched the whole pendant, the last intact seal. He didn't know if it could hold anything back. He didn't even know if it was meant to. But he knew this. If the last piece was taken, if the memory was lost, then there would be nothing left to stop Velmer from blooming through her. He looked north. The forest thickened there, older than maps, older than names. a place the villagers called the Hollow Deep, where the roots whispered and the wind never quite sounded right. If Velmer had a heart, it would be there. Kalen turned, eyes burning with the weight of memory, and walked toward it. Every step felt remembered. Every root he stepped over seemed to watch. The forest thickened as Kalen pressed north, the trees rising taller, stranger. Their trunks twisted in spirals, bark gnarled like knotted fists, and leaves so dark they gleamed blue under the dimming light. No path guided him now. The ground was soft with rot and memory, every step muffled, every breath tasting of moss and forgotten things. The Hollow Deep. He'd heard the old tales, whispers in taverns, half-warnings muttered by old hunters after too much mead. A place where no fire would catch, where even birds dared not sing. A wound in the forest, too old to heal. He hadn't believed it then. Now, he wasn't sure he ever had a choice. The pendant in his hand pulsed faintly, the only warmth left in a world that had gone cold and breathless. It seemed to pull him forward, the silver etching glowing slightly with each step. At the base of a tree thicker than a house, Kalen paused. Carved into its roots were symbols, many of them matching the runes he'd seen in the circle. Others were older, deeper, etched so far into the wood they glistened black. At the tree's base, an opening yawned wide. Not a tunnel, a mouth. Vines hung like teeth, and a cold breath rolled from within, smelling of damp stone and long-decayed herbs. From somewhere far below, he heard a faint, rhythmic thump. A heartbeat. Not his. Not human. Kalen gripped the pendant tighter, slid it into the leather pouch at his side, and stepped through the roots. The Hollow Deep swallowed him whole. Instantly, all sound ceased. No leaves, no wind. Only the sound of his footsteps, and that deep, patient heartbeat waiting in the dark below. The descent was slow, each step swallowed by earth. Kalen moved through a narrowing tunnel of roots and damp stone, the air pressing close, heavy with the scent of moss and rust. His boots found purchase on half-carved stairs, their edges worn smooth by time, or perhaps by retreat. He lit no torch. Fire didn't belong here. Instead, the pendant glowed faintly from the pouch at his side, casting a pale, green-silver sheen that lit the path just enough to walk. Walls of stone, etched with the same looping runes as before, began to appear around him. They pulsed when he passed, once in recognition. The heartbeat grew louder, steadier, and layered now, joined by faint whispers that weren't quite voices. Thoughts, regrets, fragments of vows spoken and broken alike. The stone drank them in, murmuring their echoes with every step he took deeper. The tunnel opened at last into a wide chamber. Kalen froze. The walls curved upward like the inside of a hollowed mountain, vanishing into shadow. At the center stood a dais wrapped in root and vine. Suspended above it, unmoving, was a figure cloaked in shadowed branches. Her, Saren, or what remained of her. Eyes closed, limbs relaxed, floating as though dreaming. Vines fed into her back and chest like veins, pulsing with slow, sap-colored light. Beneath her, etched into the dais, was a massive circle of runes, 3 glowing, 1 dark. The bond, broken, and far behind her, barely visible in the gloom, a massive presence shifted. Not a creature, not quite. It was becoming. Velmer. Kalen's breath caught as Saren opened her eyes, gaze meeting his. No hostility, no fear, only sorrow. Kalen's pulse thundered in his ears, but the chamber remained impossibly still. The breath of the forest did not reach this place. The air here was ancient and unmoving, sealed, like a tomb that refused to forget what it had swallowed. Saren hovered above the dais, her voice a fragile thread between them. Velmer does not take, she said softly. It waits, and when you offer something, it never refuses. Her eyes, still her own, though dimmed, glowed faintly green, not with magic, but with memory. She had not been possessed. She had offered. Why? Kaelin asked, voice raw. Why give yourself to this thing? Saren's gaze flicked to the dark room beneath her. To stop it, she said. We broke the vow. It started waking. I thought, if I offered my name, my will, it would sleep again. A pause. I was wrong. Behind her, the shadow pulsed. No form, no limbs, just a presence. Watching, waiting. A great pressure that filled the chamber like a held breath, curled deep in the roots of the world. And now, Kaelin asked, now it's learning to be patient. It won't take me. Not yet. It's waiting for you. His fingers brushed the pouch. The last pendant warmed against his touch. The final seal. You can leave, she said. Seal the bond. Run far. Let it stay forgotten. Or, she looked at him, truly looked, and he saw the pain beneath her calm. Or take what I offered. Pull me free. Bind it again. But it'll cost you. What? Your name. A beat. You'll be forgotten, Kaelin. To the world. To yourself. You'll live. But no one will know who you are, not even you. Silence bloomed like a bruise between them. Behind her, Velmer stirred. Waiting. Willing. Kaelin's grip tightened around the pendant in his pouch. It pulsed like a second heartbeat, fragile and insistent. The weight of Saren's offer pressed down on him like the roots above, ancient, heavy, final. To save her, he would have to give up everything that made him him. Not die, something stranger, to be erased gently. His footsteps echoed as he stepped closer to the dais. The chamber didn't stop him. Velmer didn't reach out. It simply waited. The sort of waiting that didn't fear time, because it had already devoured so much of it. I remember our promise, Kaelin said. Saren's eyes softened, just barely. I was the first to falter, she replied. I thought I could hold the weight alone. You shouldn't have had to. He removed the pendant from his pouch and held it out. The green-silver light flared brighter, washing the walls in swirling runes that pulsed with recognition. The runes circled below, Saren responded. 1, then 2, then all but the broken mark began to glow in rhythm. Then you choose? Saren whispered. I don't know if it's right, Kaelin said, but I know it's ours. And with that, he stepped into the circle. The vines reared back like startled snakes, but they did not strike. The dais vibrated. The chamber trembled. Velmer moved again, not forward, not attacking. Anticipating. The pendant in Kaelin's hand turned hot, the light now unbearable, until it melted away into his skin, leaving behind nothing but warmth. The runes flared. Saren fell, and Kaelin caught her. For an instant, just one breath, he thought they had done it, that she was safe, that it was over. Then the pain struck, deep, silent, not of body, but of self. His name burned in his chest like paper and fire. He woke beneath the roots, not from sleep, but from unbeing. The stone dais was cracked beside him. The air was still, damp with old breath. Moss curled along the walls like fingers drawing patterns across forgotten pages. The figure on the floor nearby stirred. Saren, whole again, unbound by vines, her breath slow but steady. He sat up slowly. Everything felt familiar, and yet hollow. His name, gone, not just lost, unwritten. He searched his mind for it, as one might search for a missing key, convinced it must be where he left it. But the space where it belonged was smooth, clean, untouched. He remembered how to move, how to speak, even how to grieve, but not who he was. Saren opened her eyes. Do you know me? She asked, her voice fragile. He hesitated. I think so. I remember everything, she whispered. Your name, it burned like a star when it left you. She touched her chest, where the vines had once fed. You gave it up for me. I think I did. You were always the one who carried things too far, she said, smiling sadly. Even yourself. He stood unsteadily, his body familiar, his soul untethered. What happens now? He asked. Saren rose beside him, her eyes brighter than they had been in ages. Now, Velmer sleeps again, bound in the hollow by your forgetting, but not forever. He looked toward the tunnel where roots parted gently to let in light. Then we go back. If you want, she said. The forest will remember you, even if no one else can. He turned to her, then glanced down at his hand. A faint green light shimmered in his palm. Not a name, but a beginning. They walked side by side through the winding roots, leaving the chamber behind. No bells rang now. No whispers tugged at Kalen's, the man's, ears. And yet, the hollow deep didn't feel empty. It felt quiet, like a book carefully closed after the last word is spoken. The forest above was not as he had left it. The light had changed. Not brighter, not darker, clearer. The shadows no longer pressed down but stretched gently beside them, as if no longer trying to hide what had always been there. Saren moved with ease now, her steps sure, her shoulders lighter. There were streaks of silver in her braid he hadn't remembered, and when she smiled at him, it was full of both sorrow and peace. "You won't remember this tomorrow," she said softly, as they reached the glade where the arch once stood. "I already feel it slipping," he murmured, touching his temple. Saren knelt and pressed a hand to the earth. The moss parted, revealing 3 stones beneath, smooth, worn, and each carved with a rune. She pointed to the first. "Your name lived here." To the second, "Mine, kept safe." And the third, "Theron's, lost, but not forgotten." She looked up at him. "You may lose your name, but the forest won't. It holds memory differently." He reached for the stone that bore his mark. As his fingers brushed it, something flickered, an image of a boy laughing beneath moonlight, hands stained with ash, a voice swearing a promise never to leave. He didn't know who it was, but he knew the feeling. That was enough. Saren took his hand. The glade shimmered, as if the forest were breathing around them. The trees creaked, not warning, not mourning, but in recognition. They would walk out of the forest together, he without a name, and yet more whole than ever. They passed beneath the arch, its runes now dull and silent. The forest let them go without resistance. No shifting paths, no unseen hands steering their steps, only the sound of leaves brushing against one another, like whispers exchanging secrets they no longer needed to keep. The man glanced back once. The glade lay quiet behind him. No shadow stirred, no vine reached. Yet something in the air hummed, like the last ring of a bell after it's been struck. An echo, not of sound, of presence. Saren led the way. Her feet knew the forest, even as the man's memory thinned like fog at midday. He tried to recall why they had entered the woods, what weight had pressed against his chest just days ago. Nothing came, but oddly, he didn't panic. He still knew the smell of pine, the shift in light before dusk, the feel of bark beneath his fingers. He still remembered how to walk, to think, to feel. What he'd lost was only a shape in the mirror, the label, the word, the anchor. And yet, he was not adrift. They crossed a stream, and he knelt instinctively, cupping the cold water in his hands. His reflection rippled there, eyes dark and wide, a small scar at his brow, a face familiar but unclaimed. "I don't recognize myself," he said. Saren crouched beside him. "You're still you," she whispered, "but no longer only you. You're part of something older now. The forest remembers you, not by name, but by deed." He watched the water for a moment longer, then let it slip through his fingers. No fear, no regret, only the faintest ache, like the last note of a song he could no longer hum, but still felt in his chest. The echo of who he had been, and the beginning of who he would become. They emerged from the forest at dusk, not the false dusk of the vale where twilight lingered unnaturally, but the true, gentle dimming of day. Light filtered across the meadow in soft oranges and golds, casting long shadows behind them as if marking their return. Ahead lay the village, small, quiet, with crooked roofs and windows aglow. A place where names still mattered, where stories were still told with ink and voice, not with bark and root. The man hesitated at the tree line. Saren turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You don't have to go back," she said. "Not if it doesn't feel right." He looked out over the fields, past the chimneys and fences, the laughter drifting faintly on the wind. "Will they know me?" Saren's voice was kind. No, the word didn't sting the way he expected. He nodded slowly, accepting it like rain. "Then what am I now?" She smiled. "You're the one who answered the call. That's enough." From the folds of her cloak, she withdrew something small, a lantern. Its glass was old, its frame bound in silver wire. It flickered faintly, not fire, but green-blue light, like the glow of forest moss beneath moonlight. "This was yours," she said. "Before." He took it, cradling it in both hands. It pulsed gently as his fingers touched the metal. It recognized him. No name etched its side. No mark to say who it belonged to. Just light. He looked back at the woods, the trees now still, the shadows long and quiet. The forest had taken his name, but it had left him something in return. A lantern, a path, a silence that was no longer empty, and a story still unfolding, told not in names, but in choices. The village welcomed dusk with the slow rhythm of oil lamps and shuttered windows. Smoke curled from chimneys, children's voices faded into quiet, and doorsteps glowed with the soft light of familiarity. It should have felt foreign, but something in the man stirred as his boots touched the cobbled path. He followed Saren through the winding streets. No one looked up, no one paused. Yet a few faces twitched with the confusion of half-remembered dreams, their gazes lingering a moment too long, as if seeing someone who should be known, but wasn't. She stopped before a small cottage. Weathered stone, ivy-covered roof, and a crooked windshield that clinked softly in the breeze. The lantern in his hand pulsed once. He didn't remember this place, but the door remembered him. Saren stepped aside, offering the threshold with a nod. Inside, the cottage was tidy, lived in, and warm. A fire crackled in the hearth. On the mantel sat carved figures, wooden animals, a trio of birds, a deer with antlers made from twisted wire. His hand hovered over them, not touching, just listening. He turned to her. "Was this yours?" she said. "Once, before the vow, before Velmer." There was no grief in her voice, no weight, just truth, gently spoken. He sat in the worn armchair by the fire. It fit him perfectly, like a coat long lost and newly found. The lantern on the table beside it pulsed in harmony with the one he carried. "You don't need a name here," Saren said. "You just need time. Will it return?" She shook her head. "Not like before, but it will become something new." She stepped back toward the door, pausing only once. "I'll return when the forest stirs again. If it calls, you'll hear it." Then she left. The fire popped. That night, the man slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but truly, the kind of sleep that folds into itself, where time loosens and memory becomes fluid. The kind of sleep where doors open that daylight keeps shut. In the dream, he stood once more in the forest, but it wasn't the hollow deep, nor the path he'd walked beside Saren. It was something older, quieter. Trees rose like cathedral columns. Light shimmered from no visible source, as if the leaves themselves glowed from within. He walked without direction, without fear. Something rustled ahead, and he followed. There, beneath an ancient tree split by lightning and healed by time, sat a boy. Dark hair, bare feet, a wooden pendant hanging from his neck, smooth, unmarked, but familiar. The boy looked up. "You forgot," he said simply. The man nodded. I had to. The boy smiled. Not sad, not joyful. Just knowing. It's okay. I'm still here. The man knelt. Who were you? You, said the boy. The part you gave up. He held out the pendant. But not all things stay lost. The man hesitated, then took it. The moment he did, the forest breathed in. And the fire, not flame, but the memory of fire, of warmth, of purpose, bloomed behind his ribs. Not a name, a knowing. He would never recall what the world once called him, but he would remember how he made others feel. The weight of choices, the shape of promises. And when he woke, the pendant lay on the table beside him. Real, wooden, and blank, waiting not for a name, but a new story. His own. Morning brought pale gold light through the cottage windows, dappling the floor in soft warmth. The man stirred slowly, the dream still fresh in his mind, not faded like most dreams, but clear, as if he had walked those woods only moments ago. He sat up, the wooden pendant resting on the table beside him. Still blank, still warm. He didn't remember where it had come from, but he felt no need to question it. The house creaked gently around him, floorboards shifting. The windshield tinkled lazily. In the kitchen, a small kettle hissed, though he didn't remember starting it. Everything moved as if the house itself remembered how he lived, even if he did not. On the wall near the hearth, a piece of parchment caught his eye. A map, faded at the edges, curled from age, but detailed. It showed the village, the bordering forest, and beyond that, the deeper paths, the hollow deep marked only with a soft, inked spiral. But something was new. Thin green lines pulsed faintly across the parchment, glowing like veins of moss beneath moonlight. They branched from the spiral outward, weaving paths that hadn't been there the day before. They were growing, alive, as if his journey had carved them into the world itself. Each step, each choice, now written into the earth. He stepped closer. One branch glowed brighter than the rest, curving eastward, toward a place labeled only with a single root. He couldn't read it, but his hand reached for it without hesitation. Something called, not as before, not a summoning, but an invitation. Outside, the wind shifted. The forest had fallen silent again, not warning, waiting. And in his chest, the ember of himself flickered once more, ready to rise. The path led him beyond the village's edge, past wildflower fields and old stone markers forgotten by most. No one stopped him. No one asked where he was going. To them, he was a passerby, a quiet man with no past and gentle eyes. But the forest knew better. He followed the pulse of the map, its memory still imprinted behind his eyes. Eastward, toward that single glowing root. As he walked, the wooden pendant around his neck warmed against his chest, not burning, not guiding, but acknowledging. The trees here were younger than the hollow deep, their trunks straight and pale, their leaves trembling at the edge of every breeze. Yet even here, something watched. Not Velmer. Something older, gentler, a presence in the soil rather than above it. Near midday, he found a stone circle. 6 monoliths, each carved with faded runes, stood like fingers reaching from the ground. Moss curled along their bases. In the center lay a stone basin filled with still water that reflected nothing, not the sky, not the trees, not even his face. He stepped closer. The water stirred. A single image rose, a child's hand placing the blank pendant on the very same basin. Then another hand, older, worn, placing a stone beside it. The image flickered. A voice, faint and low, echoed from beneath the stone. Names are weight, it said, but stories are roots. He touched the water. It accepted his fingers like memory, cool and knowing. Another image bloomed. Himself, walking the woods, nameless and whole, the pendant glowing brighter with each step. Not with who he was, but with who he was becoming. The wind shifted again. The forest to the east grew darker. A He left the stone circle with the image still flickering in his mind, not sharp like memory, but warm like a dream that lingers on the skin. The voice in the basin had spoken truth. Names could be lost, but stories rooted themselves in the world, in others, in action. And now, he walked as one remembered not by title, but by deed. The trees changed as he moved eastward. Their bark gleamed faintly, like polished bone. Flowers with silver centers bloomed along the trail, petals turning to follow him. The air was thick with the scent of elder leaves and something fainter, like parchment and ink left near a fire. The trail narrowed, and then he saw it. A gate, wrought of twisted roots and golden thread, stood in the middle of the forest with no wall to flank it. Floating just above the ground, the gate pulsed softly, as if breathing. Along its edge, words shimmered, not in any language he recognized, but he understood their meaning. Enter, bearer of forgotten truths. Your story is ready to meet you. He stepped closer, fingers brushing the air where the gate shimmered. The wooden pendant at his chest pulsed once, bright, bold, and then stilled. The gate opened without sound. Beyond it lay a forest alive in a way he hadn't felt since before the vow. Trees shaped like spirals, ferns that curled toward his steps. In the distance, faint laughter, not cruel, not mocking. The gate dissolved behind him like mist in morning light, and the forest ahead bloomed wider, warmer. This was no ordinary woodland, no wild thing bristling with ancient magic or slumbering danger. This forest was listening, and every step the man took was answered, not with sound, but sensation. The press of wind against his shoulder, the slow curl of vines clearing his path, the low hum of moss beneath his boots, resonating like distant music felt in the chest. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The grove understood him not in words, but in weight, in the shape of what he carried and what he had chosen to leave behind. After some time, the trees parted, and there, nestled between spiraling trunks, was a clearing dotted with stone seats arranged in a circle. At its center, a pedestal of woven branches, and atop it, an open book with no ink on its pages. Blank. Waiting. He stepped into the circle, drawn without hesitation. As his feet touched the earth inside it, the grove stirred. Leaves rustled overhead in no breeze. Light pooled downward in shafts, silver and still. And the book turned a page on its own. His hands hovered over it. The wooden pendant glowed softly against his chest, not burning, not pulling, simply present. He placed his hand on the open page. The parchment warmed, and then slowly, gently, words began to write themselves. Not his old name, not his old life, but moments, memories. The sound of Saren's voice in the hollow deep, the choice beneath the altar, the house that remembered him, the stone circle in the whispering east, and finally, this grove. The first sentence formed, glowing faint. The book turned its own pages as if in rhythm with his breath. Each fresh leaf bloomed with quiet lines, written not in black ink, but in a soft, glimmering green that shimmered like dew on early leaves. The words weren't forced from him. They rose through him, not recollections, but recognitions. Moments that had meaning, shaped not by titles or legacy, but by the weight of choices. His steps into the hollow deep, Saren's voice cracking through the roots. The moment he surrendered his name not in fear, but in hope. The book did not demand a full story all at once. It invited it, page by page. Behind him, the grove had grown still again, not empty, but satisfied, like a room where someone had finally spoken aloud what was always meant to be heard. Then, from the edge of the circle, a figure stepped forward. Old, wrapped in bark-colored robes, with skin like polished root and eyes like dark sap. The figure said nothing, only bowed gently. In his hands, he held a staff, not carved, not crafted, grown. At its top, a hollow ring cradled a single crystal, green and silver, matching the glow in the pendant on the man's chest. The elder offered it without question. The man took it, not as a gift, but as recognition. Another page turned. When he spoke, It was not with voice, but with the way he stood, with the silence that followed. And as he stepped from the circle, staff in hand, the grove shifted again. Trees bowed ever so slightly. The wind curled inward. The book closed itself slowly behind him. He did not turn back. His story had begun, and now he would walk as one who carried no name, only meaning. The forest opened for him, its pathways unwinding like old yarn released from tension. Each turn brought not uncertainty, but calm. Trees arched above, forming canopies that whispered with welcome rather than warning. He walked now with the staff in hand. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a tool. It was a reminder of the vow once broken and remade, of the silence that saved a friend, of the ember of a name that had burned away so that something deeper might take root. The pendant at his chest rested cool and quiet, not glowing now, just present. He passed a stream where silver fish shimmered like coins in motion. A bird with feathers the color of clouded moonlight landed on a branch above him, chirped once, and flew off again. Everything here acknowledged him, but nothing asked of him. He was a part of it. At a small hill crowned by a circle of birch trees, he stopped. Something tugged at the edge of his awareness, not pain, not urgency. A quiet call. He climbed the slope slowly, feeling each footstep stir the moss like breath. At the top, a single stone, uncarved, unmarked. He placed his hand on it. Nothing happened. No light, no sound. But inside, something shifted. A warmth blooming in his chest, a thread pulling gently through his ribs. And then, faintly, he remembered something. Not a name, not a face. Just the way sunlight felt on his skin the day they made the vow. And the way Theron laughed when he tried to skip stones. He smiled. The book had written what it could, but now his steps would write the rest. He was no longer the boy who feared forgetting. He was the wanderer the forest remembered, and the forest was vast. He descended the hill slowly, the wind brushing against his shoulders like a cloak drawn close. The world no longer felt like something to recall or understand. It felt like something to meet, moment by moment. There were no markers, no road signs, only the feeling of the path beneath his boots and the quiet awareness that every step made the trail real. As he moved, he passed through places others might have missed, a grove of trees that hummed when he passed, leaves fluttering in wordless greeting. A pool so still it reflected the sky even when clouds passed before the sun. A fallen log that pulsed faintly with light as he stepped over it, like an old creature recognizing kin. He came to a fork in the trail. One path dipped downward, into shadowed marsh where dragonflies danced like sparks above the water. The other curved upward, toward dry ridges scattered with wind-worn stones and thorny bramble. He didn't hesitate. He walked between them, where no clear trail lay. Not out of defiance, not out of pride, but because his path wasn't one to follow, it was one that unfolded. Behind him, faint impressions marked the ground, not footprints, but echoes. Moments, choices, tiny pulses of presence. The staff hummed faintly as he walked, and he realized that the runes now etched along its shaft were not ones he had read, but ones the staff had grown in response to him. His story wasn't being written by hand or word. It was being etched by being, not to be remembered, but to remain, in wind, in moss, in stone. The forest did not keep names. It kept those who meant something, and he did. Evening crept in slowly, gold slipping into blue as the sky turned soft and shadowed. The man found himself on a ridge where the trees stood thinner, their limbs reaching toward the last rays of light. The air grew still, not heavy, not silent, just listening. He paused beside a tree older than any he'd yet seen. Its bark was silvered with age, wide and ridged like the spine of some slumbering beast. The staff in his hand vibrated gently as he neared. There were marks on the tree, not carved, not natural, grown, spiraling lines like a language not meant to be read but felt. He placed a hand upon them, and as he did, a low tone rose from within the trunk, deep and resonant, not unlike the hum he'd heard in the hollow deep. But this was different. Not a warning, a song, soft, slow, rooted in memory. It wasn't words, but it told a story all the same. Of footsteps on wet leaves, of laughter shared between children beneath a harvest moon, of a promise whispered too quietly to last, but remembered nonetheless. His fingers curled against the bark. He remembered no face, no voice, no name. But he knew this feeling. Love. Not romantic. Not distant. The kind of love that binds stories to trees and songs to bark and feet to the earth long after the body has moved on. When the song faded, the tree left behind a mark where his hand had touched. Not a scar, but a shimmer. A reflection. His presence. Acknowledged. He stepped back. Not alone. The forest did not speak in voices. It spoke in echoes. And tonight it had sung his. Night fell gently, like a blanket laid over the world. The stars peeked through a patchwork sky, dim and soft, as if even they were watching in reverence. The man walked with the staff tapping lightly against the ground, a quiet rhythm to match his steady breath. Ahead, the trail curved toward a chasm, deep, silent, filled with mist that shimmered silver in the starlight. There was no railing, no carved edge, only a stretch of worn stone where the land had cracked open like a long-forgotten secret. And over it floated a bridge, not of rope or wood or stone, but of lanterns. They hung in the air in perfect stillness, hundreds of them, suspended without visible thread, each glowing a different hue: pale green, amber, blue, soft violet. The colors pulsed slowly, in rhythm, like heartbeats spread across the air. He stepped to the edge. The pendant on his chest warmed once more. The first lantern brightened. A soft note chimed, delicate and warm. He placed one foot forward. The lantern beneath it held him, solid, trusting. Another step, another chime, and slowly, step by step, he crossed. Each lantern pulsed as he passed, their light joining briefly with the glow of his pendant, then dimming back to their soft rhythm. He realized, halfway across, that each light responded not to weight, but to memory, not his own. The forest's, each lantern a moment remembered, a kindness, a vow, a sacrifice. He was walking not on a bridge of fireflies or stars, but across the collective memory of a world that had not forgotten him, even when he had forgotten himself. At the final lantern, he paused, looked back. The bridge remained whole, a path behind him, glowing proof that presence was enough. Then he stepped down onto solid earth. Beyond the bridge, the forest grew quiet in a new way. Not the hush of fear, but the hush of arrival. The trees here were spread wide, tall and pale like the ribs of some vast, slumbering creature. Between their trunks, the ground was soft with moss that glowed faintly underfoot. No path marked the way, but his steps knew where to go. The pendant around his neck no longer glowed. It simply pulsed with a steady warmth, like a stone warmed by the sun. Soon, the trees opened into a perfect ring, a circle etched into the earth itself. Not man-made, not planted, something older, a memory grown into shape. Around the edge stood 12 standing stones, each inscribed with a single symbol. No two were the same. At the center, a pool of still water mirrored the night sky perfectly, yet the stars it reflected didn't match those overhead. They were his stars, the ones that watched over the story he had lived. As he stepped into the circle, the 12 stones pulsed one by one, in turn, like voices acknowledging his presence. No words, no test, just welcome. In the still water, an image began to form, not of his face, but of all the moments that had shaped him. Saren's hand reaching for his in the hollow deep. The altar before it collapsed. The house that remembered. The tree that sang. The bridge of lanterns behind him. And then, the face of a boy, younger, laughing, innocent. His beginning. Not a name. A feeling. A truth. He knelt beside the pool, touched its surface. The image rippled, blurred, and reformed into now. A man with no name, but not without story. From behind one of the stones, a breeze stirred. He stood slowly, the circle calm around him. The water's surface stilled once more, leaving no reflection, no memory, just openness. His fingers hovered above it, no longer searching for answers. He had become one. At the edge of the ring, nestled between two ancient stones, sat a small flame. Not burning, not consuming, just existing like a heartbeat without a body. Pale gold, flickering gently, it cast no shadow and gave no heat. Yet it drew him. He approached and knelt before it. Within the flame, a shape formed, a seed. Small, simple, wrapped in light that seemed older than the stars. He did not question what it was. He simply knew, in the way trees know when to lean toward the sun, that it was his. Not a gift, not a reward, but a continuation. A piece of himself distilled not from memory, but from meaning. He reached out. The flame leaned toward him, welcoming, and the seed floated gently into his palm. The moment it touched his skin, the pendant at his chest dimmed completely, not fading, but transferring. What once was worn as a symbol was now held as a truth. The staff pulsed once in his other hand. The 12 stones brightened, and in the wind, another voice, or perhaps the same one, circling back, whispered, "You are no longer the story forgotten. You are the one who plants new ones." He closed his hand around the seed. It didn't burn. It glowed. A warm promise. A quiet power. A single truth waiting to be sown. The forest had watched him walk. Now, it would follow where he grew. He left the circle in silence, the seed held gently in his palm. The forest did not darken behind him. It didn't fade or vanish. It simply watched, not as a guardian, not as a keeper, but as a witness. The path ahead wasn't marked. It unfolded. With every step he took, the earth seemed to breathe beneath his feet. Trees leaned closer, not looming but listening. Ferns unfurled at his passing, their leaves brushing his boots like a whispered welcome. Light trickled down through the canopy like memory returning, slow and golden. He came to a clearing he did not recognize. Yet he knew it. A patch of earth bare of trees, rich with moss and soft soil. At its center stood a single stone bench, smoothed by time, facing a patch of earth that looked, waiting. A cradle in the wild. He sat, and for the first time, he felt still. Not restless, not uncertain. Simply present. He opened his hand. The seed glowed faintly, not bright, not proud, just steady. It pulsed once, and for a moment, he thought he heard a voice. Not in words, but in feeling. A beginning. He knelt and pressed the seed into the soil. The earth accepted it without resistance. No shimmer, no flash, only warmth spreading through his fingers and up his arms like sunlight through roots. And then silence. But not the silence of absence, the silence of growth. He stood again, watching the soil, knowing whatever would come next would not bloom in haste. It would take time, like all true things, like stories. No plaque would mark this place. No name would be spoken. But one day, a traveler might find it. The forest let him pass like a breeze through tall grass, untouched, unchallenged, welcome. Behind him, the seed slept gently beneath the earth. Ahead, the trees stretched tall and quiet, their branches curved like arches in a great cathedral of green. He walked not as one searching, nor as one fleeing. He walked like one who belonged. Birds called softly overhead. Somewhere, a stream murmured through stone. But above all, it was the wind that spoke most clearly now, no longer a whisper, no longer a question. A voice, low and endless, moving between bough and leaf. It didn't say his name, but it told his story. And more, it carried it. As he stepped onto a narrow ridge of stone, the wind curled around him like an old friend. He paused, listening not with ears, but with the bone-deep stillness he had learned in the hollow deep. There were voices in the wind now, not words, not ghosts, rememberers. A child laughing somewhere in the distance, a soft hum from someone mending a coat in a house where he'd once slept, a lantern glowing in the hands of another traveler, walking a path that had only existed because he once walked it. The wind carried them all. In him, he looked out from the ridge. Beyond the forest, the horizon opened, rolling hills painted silver by starlight, rivers like threads of memory weaving through shadow and stone. In the far distance, lights, scattered like fireflies, signs of villages and stories still unfolding. Not waiting for him, but open to him. He took a breath and stepped forward. And the wind, ever kind, followed, carrying no name. Only a presence, only a story. And somewhere behind him, a tiny sprout broke the soil. Its first night deepened as he walked, but darkness never quite settled. The stars above shimmered brightly, and the earth below glowed faintly in places, moss lanterns, moonflowers, stones warm from ancient magic. The wind kept close beside him, not driving, not pulling, just walking too. Eventually, he found a rise in the land, a knoll half-wrapped in ivy, its top flat and clear. A place to rest. Not because he was weary, but because the moment invited stillness. He sat, not with purpose, just to be. He placed the staff beside him. The pendant around his neck no longer pulsed, no longer needed to. It had become part of him now, as natural as his breath, as quiet as the space between footsteps. The wind coiled gently around the rise. And then something changed. A flicker of warmth in the air. The smell of smoke, not sharp or heavy, but soft, like pine wood caught in memory. A glow bloomed before him. A fire, rising from nothing, its flames low and golden, casting no harsh shadows. A hearth, not lit by flint, but by welcome. The kind of fire that burns not to cook, not to drive off beasts, but to gather near. A center for stories, a quiet anchor for wandering souls. And through the firelight, faint shapes appeared. Not ghosts, impressions. A woman with silver hair, her face serene. A boy skipping stones across starlit water. A friend whose eyes had once held sorrow, now at peace. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. They had been part of his story, and now they sat beside it, present in the glow. Morning did not come in a blaze of light, but in the gentler hush before birdsong, the forest holding its breath in silver stillness. The fire before him had gone out sometime in the night, but its warmth lingered, not in ash, but in air. He stirred slowly, rising from where he'd sat, bones loose and thoughts steady. The impressions from the night before were gone. No shapes in the smoke, no whispers in the wind. Only memory remained. And then, a presence. He felt it before he heard it. A subtle pressure behind him, like a shadow remembering how to move. He turned. A figure stood at the edge of the rise, dressed in dark moss and pale bark. Their face was hooded, their hands folded before them. No staff, no pendant, no markings. Yet somehow, they felt known, as if their story curved alongside his like a parallel thread. No footsteps had announced their coming. They simply were. He tilted his head, a question forming without words. The figure stepped forward. "You've walked long," they said, a voice neither male nor female, not old nor young, just steady. And now the forest listens. The man said nothing. There was no need to interrupt listening. The figure reached into their robe and withdrew a bundle wrapped in green silk. "This is not a gift," they said, placing it beside the cold hearth. "It is a mirror." He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a journal, blank, soft leather cover. He carried the journal as he walked, its weight light in his satchel, but steady, as though the forest itself pressed gently through its cover. The wind remained close, a quiet companion, rustling leaves, nudging ferns, lifting the corners of the pages when he paused. By midday, he reached a grove unlike any before. No grand trees, no twisted roots, just wide stumps, smooth flat like tables, scattered across a sun-dappled clearing. Upon each rested books, hundreds of them. No shelves, no ceilings, no boundaries. Just a library grown beneath the open sky. He stepped between them, each stump glowing faintly beneath its load, some bound in bark, others wrapped in silk or vines, a few no more than sheaves of pressed leaves tied with moss. Every book was different. Every book was alive, not in the way of breathing, but in the way of remembering. He opened one, drawn without question. Inside, stories written in looping script, unfamiliar but readable. A tale of a woman who could speak to moonlight, of a boy who asked a mountain for its name and waited 10 years for an answer, of a beast who shed its teeth to grow trees. He closed it gently and moved to another. This one bore only single lines, scattered like footprints on a quiet path. She wept once and fed the river. He stayed even when the storm didn't. No one remembers the gatekeeper, but every story passed through him. He smiled, not because he knew these people, but because he understood them. He reached into his satchel and withdrew it. He wrote until the sky began to dim, not from sunset, but from the soft drawing in of twilight, that quiet moment where everything seems to pause between one breath and the next. The wind held still as he lifted his pen, reading over the last line he had written. He did not remember the name he gave up, but he remembered why it was worth giving. The page glowed faintly for a moment, as though the ink had sunk deeper than paper, as though the words had rooted themselves. He closed the journal gently and placed it on the stump before him. There was no ceremony, no whispering crowd of leaves, just stillness. And then, one of the library's stumps shifted. Slowly, reverently, its bark twisted upward and out like petals unfolding. In the center, a hollow formed, just wide enough for one book. His. He stood in silence as the journal lifted on a breath of wind and nestled itself into the waiting space. Moss grew instantly around it, gentle tendrils curling to hold it in place. The stump glowed once. The forest had accepted it, not as a record of fact, but as something truer, a story that had grown honestly, step by step, root by root. He stepped back, and as he did, the wind moved once more, not playfully, not sharply, but with direction, calling. Beyond the library, a path revealed itself, narrow, lined with soft lantern moss and small white blossoms. Not demanding, simply waiting. He took up his staff, the pendant quiet at his chest. He no longer wondered what lay ahead. He no longer needed a destination. The story was not about where he was going. The path ahead wound gently between low hills, where the trees stood farther apart and the sky stretched wide, painted in shades of soft indigo and rose. Stars blinked lazily overhead, early risers in the deepening dusk. As he walked, the wind returned, no longer a whisper or echo, but a melody. Low, slow, and familiar. Like a tune hummed in childhood and remembered by the bones before the mind. It wasn't a song of words. It was the song of being. And something curious began to happen. As he walked, the path began to respond. Where his boots touched moss, it grew richer, lusher. Stones tilted to meet his steps, forming a rhythm beneath him. Blossoms turned their heads as he passed, petals humming softly in harmony with the wind's tune. He realized, with a quiet warmth, that the song was no longer just the forest's. It was his, too. Not composed, not recited, but felt, shaped by every choice, every silence, every rooted truth he had carried without a name. He paused beside a narrow brook that bubbled with laughter, its waters weaving through wildflowers. Kneeling, he touched the surface. His reflection shimmered there, no longer blank or distant, but whole. He saw the curve of a smile earned through stillness, the steadiness of eyes that had once been lost. He saw not who he had been, but who he had become, a man without a name, but with a voice. And now, the forest was listening to him, not as a stranger, not as a visitor, but as a thread in its own song. The wind circled him once, lifting leaves, and as night settled fully over the land, the forest canopy above became a tapestry of stars and shifting shadows. But here, on the winding path that knew his steps, there was no darkness. The ground itself glowed faintly beneath his feet, not in harsh brightness, but in soft pulses, a rhythm of light that beat like a second heart. Gold, green, blue, and silver flickered under roots and stones, woven into the very soil. Not magic exactly. Memory. Moments. Each step recalled something he had done, not by image or sound, but by light. Here, a green pulse, steady and slow, when he'd sat in silence beside the hearth and chosen not to speak, only to listen. There, a blue flicker. The moment he touched the ancient tree that sang in silence and knew it remembered him. And farther still, a rich golden shimmer, when he had placed his journal into the grove, giving the forest a part of himself. The light was not showing him what he had done. It was echoing it, carrying it forward. He came to a place where the roots of an enormous tree arched into a wide cradle of earth. Lantern moss grew in perfect rings. In the center, a pool of still water reflected not the sky, but the path behind him. He stepped to its edge. In the water, he saw flickers of himself, not just as he was now, but as he had been through the journey. Uncertain, silent, afraid, brave, kind, steady. And in every form, the same eyes, the same quiet will. He knelt, and for the first time, he spoke. The forest stretched wide and endless before him, but he no longer measured it in distance. Every breath of wind, every flicker of lantern moss beneath his boots, every sway of branch overhead was part of the same quiet truth. He was no longer journeying through the forest. He was part of it. As dawn neared, the sky behind the trees lightened, not in gold or flame, but in twilight's softest hue, a violet gray that made stars shimmer more clearly. It was always twilight here, not because the sun had forgotten to rise, but because this place was held in a moment between memory and growth, between name and being. He reached a clearing. Grasses bowed in the hush, and a great stone rose in the center, flat and wide, carved not by hand but by time. In its surface, thousands of tiny grooves and etchings glimmered faintly. He stepped closer and saw what they were. Stories, not full accounts, not paragraphs, single lines, fragments, truths. She waited, even after the storm passed. He built nothing, but gave everything a place to grow. No one remembered his name, but the earth did. He found space between them, and the wind curled at his side. He placed a hand on the stone. He did not write with pen. He did not speak aloud. He simply was, and the stone accepted that. A single new line appeared, softly glowing. He walked without a name and left the forest full. He smiled, not because it was an ending, but because it wasn't. He turned. The wind rose gently around him, playful now. There was another hill ahead, another grove, another voice waiting to be heard. He took a step, and the story walked on. The end.